The Field of 68 Media Network presents Red is the New Orange, a Syracuse basketball podcast.
Vince intercepts a pass, breakaway for the freshman guard, he flies and slams! Aerial assault from Judah Mintz. Looking to go back door to Bell, they get it to a near corner three, knocks it down! Chris Bell, the sharpshooter.
Bringing you everything you need to know out of the 315.
Up top, Williams surges ahead, up with the right hand and in. A pretty up and under move from Benny Williams to beat his man. Over to Taylor. He skips into the lane, puts up a floater, and drops in.
Let's get it started with your hosts, Ian Unsworth and Johnny Gadamowitz.
Well, about 5.5 months later, we are back, and we're ready for year 2 of Red is the New Orange. Red Autry's second year in the head position, running Syracuse men's basketball. Ian Unsworth, Johnny Gadamowitz, two SU grads now 2 years removed, which is pretty crazy to say.
Jeez, we're old.
Yeah, we're getting up there. Gray hairs incoming. But two SU grads back on the Field of 68 podcast network to talk all about it. If you're wondering where we've been for the last 5.5 months, well, minor league baseball has consumed our entire lives. Johnny, where were you?
I can agree. I can definitely agree. We were both in the Northeast. I was in Brooklyn, running it back year 2 with the Mets minor league affiliate, the Cyclones, down on Coney Island. So a lot of baseball this summer, which is how we like it. But as that weather starts to get a little cooler, Ian, we will shift our focus onto the hardwood.
Yeah, I was in New Hampshire with the New Hampshire Fisher Cats in Manchester, AA affiliate of the Blue Jays. Had a lot of fun.
Did you get to see the leaves turn color at all before you took off? No.
Dude, I mean, I left in early September. It was still cool. Like, it was 70 degrees up there still. The weather is not that different from
right.
So, but it feels like fall now. At least we're getting pretty close to it. I'm back in North Carolina for all who are wondering, and it's about to get pounded by a hurricane. So, hope any of our listeners in Florida, Georgia, down even further south are staying well, keeping safe, staying dry, hopefully.
Hope you didn't have any tickets to Mets Braves this week.
Yeah, that would ruin your weekend. And the Mets are now in Milwaukee, and the Braves are probably out of a playoff spot. So, back to the task at hand. More importantly than what we've been up to, what has the Field of 68 been up to? And what has Syracuse basketball been up to? If you want the latest when it comes to basketball, college, and even some high school recruiting stuff, Field of 68 on Twitter is your go-to spot. Also check out the YouTube, both first and second channel. The second channel is where you can find all of our podcasts as well as other podcasts. If you got a Duke fan, if you got a UNC fan, a Kansas fan, an Arizona fan in your family, that's where you can find all these great podcasts brought to you by a lot of young people like us, college students alike from all across the country. And our Twitter page, F68_Cuse, is where you can find live streams of all of our podcasts right when they come out, as well as some of our in-game reactions. We don't tweet all that often, and I think it's better that way. But every once in a while, when something needs to be said, Johnny, we'll let the people know.
Yeah, there's enough out there. It kind of tends to get lost in the vortex of Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. So we kind of pick and choose our spots, but definitely give us a follow regardless.
F68_Cuse again, and you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. What's the other podcast network, Johnny, that we are on?
We've got Apple, we've got Spotify, we've got YouTube. Is it Megaphone? I want to say
Megaphone.
That's another
Megaphone
one that we'll fire it on, covering all our bases.
So yes, we spread it. We spread the blanket wide, and hopefully you've been keeping up with the Syracuse basketball landscape. So we'll try to give you a quick off-season recap. Johnny, I've got a 30-minute timer. It starts in 3, 2, 1.
Oh, is that a challenge? All right, let's do it.
30 minutes to recap the Syracuse basketball offseason. And we start with the departures. There were a lot of them. And with the transfer portal, with the way NIL works nowadays, you can kind of expect that. But first and foremost, two that were not impacted by the portal nor NIL at all. First, Jerry McNamara takes a head coaching job at Siena. Well deserved.
Yeah, it felt like it was only a matter of time, right, when Jerry did not indeed get the mantle following Mr. Boeheim's retirement. And this is someone who clearly deserved a head coaching job, right? Obviously has been around the block. Made perfect sense, too, that it comes from an upstate New York school, not too far from his neck of the woods. Jerry is obviously built quite the reputation for himself in the upstate New York region and really the Northeast as a whole. But you got to feel very happy for him, right? It feels like the timing of it makes sense, right? No more Judah Mintz, obviously the centerpiece of Syracuse's backcourt, which we'll talk more a little bit about coming up, but not necessarily anyone outside of maybe J.J. Starling that's all too bummed about G-Mac's departure, you would think, from a development standpoint in terms of that relationship, that one-on-one type nature. So really excited to follow along. If you're a Syracuse fan, you're going to be keeping tabs with what the Saints are doing in the Albany area this season, and for good reason.
Siena has to rebuild. They were terrible last year. Carmen Messerello got the yank. See ya, buddy, because they only won 5 games.
Something like that. They were bottom 5 in KenPom like all year.
Yes, they were brutal in the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. Not going to call it the MAAC anymore. Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. Jerry McNamara also took Peter Carey with him, which you could understand. Peter Carey would always be behind the 8 ball at Syracuse, trying to bring in big guys every year, and Carey only got flashpoint minutes last year, had injury issues again, and it never felt like he was really a fit at a high, well, now it's Power 4. This is the first time we'll ever say Power 4 program on the podcast, so check that box. But he just wasn't a Power 4 player.
No, and it felt like, unfortunately, it was the injuries that kind of derailed his Syracuse career, because there was always some level of potential, and his name did get brought up every couple of weeks. It felt like if a big man like Naheem McLeod went down or something like that, oh, can Peter Carey step in and fill these shoes? But unfortunately, Syracuse fans just never really saw it. You sort of felt like the writing was on the wall. Okay, this isn't necessarily going to work out. Lo and behold, he's no longer in the conversation.
Defensively, not much of an impact player. He had 1 or 2 good games last year. I think he had to play against Quentin Post and kind of got blown out of the water. Not that much of a surprise. And offensively, was there much to dream on? No. Could finish around the rim, but other than that, Syracuse has better options at the center spot. But overall, would love to see Siena come to the Dome in a year or 2. It'll probably get harder and harder as the ACC expands. You have more teams to play, more road trips. And it seems like now and again, Syracuse gets caught in these weird non-conference one-off games. They play Maryland this year. And we'll talk about the schedule later as we dive deeper. But you've got a one-off with Maryland. You've got a one-off with Tennessee. And every once in a while, you get thrown in a sponsored game or 2, which is great. But at the same time, you'd like to see the New York schools, especially Central New York, the northern tier of New York, just keep playing each other and keep up the in-state rivalries because, Johnny, as we've unfortunately seen, Syracuse does not run through upstate New York like it used to.
Yeah, well, you would think that if they can play Colgate essentially every single year, and now it looks like we're going to see more and more Lemoyne over the next couple of years, obviously, with their jump to the D1 level. Obviously, those schools, you punch it in Apple Maps, you punch it in Waze, take your pick. It's going to give you a little bit of a lesser mileage total as far as what you would from Syracuse to Siena, but still all the same. I group it in with that upstate New York school grouping, and obviously now those relationships are there. So hopefully, yes, you're spot on, Ian. It is not too long before we are talking about Syracuse and Siena being, if not an every year thing, at least something that we can come to expect to see more than just kind of sporadic here and there.
And it's easy for Syracuse fans and other fans alike to come to the Dome. A lot of times you watch an early season game, especially one that's played on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, like where are the fans? Where's the crowd? Well, the students have class, they've got stuff to do, and people have work, understandable. But if you wrap up a whole bunch of Siena fans and you take that drive down to the Dome, I think a whole lot of people from the capital region will want to come and see the Dome and be a part of a game there and enjoy that experience compared to playing Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, their fans don't travel too well.
Yeah, you got Seattle on the schedule. Who from Seattle is coming to the Dome? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
they're not making the trip. It's not necessarily circle it on your calendar. But no, it's a good point. Whenever you see Syracuse host a Colgate or a Cornell or dare I say even Lemoyne as well, you do kind of sense that level of camaraderie and level of community that you don't get with some of these other schools that geographically just don't have those same ties.
Athletically, you make a little bit more revenue too.
Yep,
More butts and seats, more concession sales. There you go.
sure.
All right. Up next on the departures list, Judah Mintz goes to the NBA. Not very successfully, but he goes. And again, this was impending. Not necessarily a sure thing, but it felt like the writing was on the wall.
It did. And for Judah, obviously, this has kind of been hanging over his head for quite a while now. We didn't know if it was going to come last year. We didn't know if it was going to come this year. Obviously, it ended up happening. And you hope that it works out in his favor, right? We've had numerous conversations on this very podcast about how his game kind of translates over to the next level? Do you get that free throw merchant type guard seeing success at the NBA level? I don't know. We'll see. Judah's going to have to develop his game a little bit, but that is besides the point. From a Syracuse standpoint, it's a big loss. We can't undersell it, Ian, right? This is the guy who has been the best player on the team now for probably each of the past 2 seasons. Wasn't really able to take him to that promised land, so to speak, but don't get it twisted. Just because Syracuse was not a tournament team with Judah Mintz as its centerpiece doesn't mean that not having Judah Mintz in the fold anymore is a good thing. I think we'll have conversations over the course of the year where we'll look at each other and say, wow, man, we could have used a Judah Mintz type performance tonight, right? And maybe that's the difference between wins and losses. But for Judah, obviously now he's with your Sixers, Ian, so you'll have a chance to follow along, and we wish him nothing but the best. But I think, as we continue to break down some of these departures, this obviously, I don't think you have to read too deep into it, is clearly the biggest departure out of the entire group.
So if you're wondering what happened to him, didn't get drafted. So Syracuse is still waiting on a player to get drafted. The last one was Elijah Hughes.
Yes.
Judah signed a summer league contract with the Sixers. He was okay. Wasn't necessarily great. 22 minutes a game. About 12.5 points a game, steal and a half, 2 assists per game, and 6 free throws made on 7 attempts. So as you said, Johnny, he can still get to the line. And let's be clear, the Summer League is not the actual NBA. Paul George isn't stepping on the floor in the Summer League. LeBron, Curry, none of those guys are on the Summer League floor. But it's NBA competition. The level's higher. So that's a good sign. So he's on the Exhibit 10, which means he'll probably spend most of the season with the Delaware Bluecoats, G League affiliate of the Sixers. And who knows? That's a chance for a potential stepping stone. Injuries happen. Judah could make his way onto the NBA roster. But as of right now, he's a project. And the project, as we knew all the way back to his freshman year, probably is dependent on his jump shot. And we'll see whether that comes along. Up next on the departure list, another not so surprising transfer. Justin Taylor off to VCU. Mid-major program, a very good mid-major program at that. But last year, Taylor struggled to fit in and spent a lot of time and winning time on the bench.
Yeah, kind of got lost in the shuffle, was just never really able to piece it together. In a different way, we were talking about Peter Carey before, in a very different manner, in a very different way, because Taylor was someone who there were some expectations for, right? He was seeing the floor. He did get billed as a guy who could be a piece, and a real contributor at that. He had so many peaks and valleys, though, right? There were games where, he would be seemingly nowhere to be found. Right? Or he'd get into some early foul trouble, or, his shot wasn't falling, and then it became, okay, well, if his shot's not falling, what does he really bring to the table?
A lot of people probably spent time yelling at him to shoot the ball.
Correct.
Because he looked scared at times.
Yes, he did look hesitant. This was not a player who exuberated confidence by any stretch. So, it's a loss. And I think it speaks to kind of the larger point here, Ian, which we'll continue to dissect with our next couple of departures. But this team lost a lot. There's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of uncertainty going into this 2024-2025 season, which is kind of weird when you couple it with the fact that it's year 2 of a head coach. Right? Like this almost feels like the start of a new era. Even though it's year 2 under Red, it kind of feels like you're wiping the slate clean a little bit. And Taylor's departure is just another reason under that list.
2 more guys that left that are very notable. And the other thing to buckle up with that point, this is the class that Jim Boeheim said, I want to coach them. I promised them I would stick around to coach these players for a year. And they're all gone. The entire class, as we round out our departures with Malik Brown and Quadir Copeland, the entire class is gone. What does that say?
It says a lot. And it's only a matter of time until Malik Brown is going to put together a typical Malik Brown performance against Syracuse, staying in the ACC, going to Duke. Copeland to McNeese is interesting. I think that's something that if you told a Syracuse fan that, hey, you were going to lose the guy who could potentially, step into the shoes of a Mintz and be a real piece on both ends to McNeese, no less. I think that's more a testament to the state of college athletics right now as a whole, obviously with NIL and whatnot. But both these guys, not quite as big of a Mintz loss because neither of them were as much of an impact player as Judah was. But if Judah leaving is 1A in terms of importance, Malik and Quadir, and Malik especially, is right there with 1B. I don't know. It makes for a lot of uncertainty. And I use that word already twice now, but I think it really does hold true when you think about what this program has lost and what they return, which we'll kind of shift gears to now here. There's a lot of minutes that got to be played. And there's a lot of guys on this roster that haven't necessarily proven it at the ACC level that they can handle that bulk of work. Time will tell.
So 2 thoughts on Brown and Copeland. First, I know some people down here in Durham that are very close to the Duke program, and they say that Malik Brown will be probably coming off the bench, which is very interesting. But if you follow college basketball, you know the kind of talent that Duke has and in the front court. And Malik Brown, love him to death, is not Cooper Flack. That's a very easy statement to make. I mean, I would stamp that and fly it across all of North Carolina, and I don't think anyone would disagree. So he's going to come off the bench, and he did it well as a freshman. And I think sometimes last year we saw him get overmatched because he was playing the 5. And Malik Brown is not meant to play the 5. We saw a little bit of a blossoming 3-point shot. We saw his game start to expand just little by little, piece by piece, but there's still a ways to go. So hopefully the Duke coaching staff, for Malik's purposes, helps him keep developing and he doesn't get stuck just watching these superstars that Duke brings in year after year go crazy, because that could certainly happen where you get buried. McNeese, on the other hand, is the land of the lost boys. I was looking at their roster earlier, and it is transfer on transfer on transfer, and they have 3 players that are taller than 6'8". But that's what Will Wade does. He makes it work. When he wasn't completely violating any statute the NCAA could put at him at LSU, he was making it work. That was a good team. And they made the NCAA tournament last year and were a popular upset pick. That didn't work out. I picked him. But Copeland should have a chance to run and gun, which we know he loves to do. So hopefully those work out. But this is not the kind of thing where you look at these guys leaving and you can say, oh, this might be a net positive for Syracuse.
No,
you hit the nail on the head,
a
John.
lot of holes.
A lot of not only minutes, but big time minutes to be played. And so now with the arrivals portion that we kind of transition to, from a player standpoint, Syracuse is counting on dudes to step up from mid-major conferences. First and foremost, though, we got some personnel changes beyond just players. First, a new assistant coach. Someone's got to take GMAC's place. That's Dan Engelstad, the former head coach at Mount St. Mary's. Not often do you see a head coach, period, step aside to be an assistant. But I think this isn't a question of Mount St. Mary's wanting Dan Engelstad to leave. I think this was an Engelstad choice, first and foremost, because of a relationship he's developed with Autry all the way back to high school. And secondly, he worked his way up. He was coaching at Southern Vermont College. I mean, I did not know Southern Vermont College existed.
Yeah, you want to talk about paying your dues, and Engelstad has certainly done that. And I'm sure the allure of a big program like a Syracuse, combined with that relationship with Autry that you alluded to, Ian, was enough. And I think if you're a Syracuse fan, you almost take that fact of, okay, hey, this guy is a former head coach, and you view it as a positive, right? This guy has checked boxes that a lot of assistants haven't. And he can bring stuff to the table from a leadership standpoint that maybe other assistants in the past have not had to reach into that bag of tricks before. So I don't think it's a bad problem to have whatsoever. And I think obviously from a relationship standpoint with Autry, there's a comfort level there. There's a familiarity there. And you hope that he becomes a real piece and can fit in quite nicely with the rest of the group.
And you think Mount St. Mary's and you think Baltimore, Maryland, DMV, but something that was highlighted in a Syracuse.com piece when Engelstad was brought on was that he recruited players from all over the place to fill his rosters at these smaller mid-major schools. Florida, Michigan, DC, Texas. He went everywhere. And for Syracuse, I think that's something you need. You can't just recruit the Eastern Seaboard. You have to get out and find other sources of talent, and in the portal and also in the high school ranks. You look at the class of 2025, these New York City guards that Syracuse used to get class after class after class are going elsewhere. You've got guys going to Marquette and Georgia Tech, and Rick Pitino is around at St. John's, and he wants more NIL to give these guys. So Syracuse doesn't have the free access to New York City anymore that it once did. And I think everyone knows that at this point. But instead of trying to bang our heads against a wall and go back to New York City and try and fail, why not spread the Syracuse recruiting wings and see where else you can get players from? I don't think that's a bad thought at all.
Yeah, I mean, it applies to really every facet of life, right? The wider of a net that you cast, the better results you're going to get, right? The more options you consider, the more you can really sit down and think about who fits, and you've got a bigger selection pool of who you can go out there and recruit. So obviously, look, Red's got the DMV area stamped down. We know that. That was a big selling point when he first got the job. So it's not as if you needed another guy who was just going to come in and recruit the heck out of that area, because frankly, they already have that. So that reach of Engelstad to be able to go kind of coast to coast with it is something that could really pay dividends for sure.
And another addition to the Q, it's not a coach. It's a front office at this point, is a general manager. College basketball teams have general managers now, and Syracuse's is Alex Klein, a former scout from the Knicks who has been deeply embedded in college and high school basketball since his own high school days. He started his own recruiting platform, got it integrated with Yahoo Sports, and then built his way up from there. He's worked with the Pelicans, he's worked with the Knicks, and at Syracuse, this general manager position will be responsible for mainly facilitating NIL, facilitating and keeping an eye on the transfer portal, and then also developing and keeping relations with former SU players.
Yeah, maybe not.
Jim Boeheim's not going to do it, then
yeah,
this is probably your second best choice.
No, it's a great spot, and maybe not as much the real-world basketball experience as Adrian Wojnarowski, who took an identical position over with the Bonnies, a little bit west of Syracuse, obviously. But yeah, by the way, just reading up on Klein, and he went to Syracuse, studied at Syracuse, graduated with a bachelor's degree from Syracuse, and none other than broadcast and digital journalism. same degree that, of course, yours truly holds. So who knows? Maybe one of us has a future college basketball GM in the cards down the line.
Johnny, if I'm a college basketball GM in 15 to 20 years, we're going to have a class reunion and people are going to be looking at me sideways. Either way, though, I think it's a good addition. I think there was a lot on every coach's plate when the transfer portal hit. And at Syracuse, over the past couple of years, you've seen mass exodus over mass exodus. And everyone wonders why. So hopefully Alex Klein will have answers. If he is allowed to speak to the media, hopefully he'll have answers for some of these decisions as to why guys leave, why guys come back. And Syracuse can continue its upward trend in the high school recruiting areas because the Orange, since Autry has took over, have done well. They've kept Donnie Freeman around. You have Elijah Moore coming in this year, and both seem to be very positive additions. And you got a top now 15 prospect in Sadiq White, who's committed in the class of 2025. A super rangy forward, guy that can get up and down the floor, has a consistently improving jump shot. Kyan Anthony's still on the board, as well as many other top 30, top 35 guys. And then tomorrow, as we're recording this on Thursday, Ryder Frost, who is Syracuse in his top 5, will make his decision. Crystal balls point towards Notre Dame. If you look at a picture of the kid, looks like he's built for Notre Dame. That's all I'm going to say about that. But he's got a bunch of crystal ball predictions in for the Fighting Irish, so maybe it's not meant to be. He can shoot the lights out, though, and that's something Syracuse needs.
And if you want something to kind of offset the trepidation of all the holes that are on this year's roster, at least on paper, again, because we haven't seen him play a basketball game yet, go do yourself a favor and watch some Donnie Freeman highlights if you haven't already. This kid is the real deal. I don't think it's too far-fetched to say, Ian, that it won't be very long before he is the best player on this year's team. You bring back Starling. He's going to lead the backcourt, obviously. But outside of J.J. Starling, Donnie Freeman could be the it guy. I really do believe that. Now, what does that say about a program that you're relying on a freshman to come in and maybe be the leading scorer? That's a little bit of a different story. But that shouldn't take away from the excitement whatsoever of what he could potentially do. Obviously, it's going to be a transition, right? Anytime you make the jump from high school to college, there's a drop-off there. But he played at IMG. So it's not as if this is a guy who is not used to playing at the high level against guys who are profiled similarly to him. I'm really excited for that. I feel like we've been talking about him forever, and now we finally get to watch it and reap those benefits of what he can do on the court.
He is one of Andy Katz's top 10 college freshmen to watch going into this upcoming season. Carmelo Anthony was not on that list. Just keep in mind. So very high praise for Mr. Donnie Freeman. All right, Johnny, we have about 6 minutes left on our 30-minute time to recap the Syracuse offseason. We will have plenty of time to talk about the new players that Red Autry has brought in via the portal. So, we'll gloss over them now, and I'm sure as we get closer and closer, a month away from game number 1, we will dive deeper. But first, the biggest name is Eddie Lampkin, who's on his 3rd school in 5 years. Started off at TCU, pretty, I would say, sticky departure from Jamie Dixon and the Horned Frogs. Not an amicable separation. Let's put it that way. There were some barbs exchanged, some rumors flew around. He ended up at Colorado and then turned out to play pretty well. I mean, only 1 year there, but contributed on an NCAA tournament team. And if you watched the NCAA tournament last year, you could see where Lampkin plays really well, and you can also see at times he'll struggle. So you get good and you get bad.
Yeah, he's big. He's a body. He's 6'11". I'm curious to see how the Lampkin-McLeod dynamic sort of plays out. Feels like everybody forgot about Naheem McLeod, but he's still here, and he figures to see some minutes. So with Lampkin, he's big, 6'11". He's also a pretty good passer. Over 2 assists per game last year with Colorado, which for a guy who's 6'11", you'll sign up for. was fifth in the Pac-12 in rebounding, so he can get down and dirty. And he figures to probably you'd think, Ian, see some real minutes, and I would think be the starting big man in the middle at the 5, depending on how things shuffle out over the course of the past couple of weeks. But definitely a name worthy of starting to familiarize yourself with if you haven't already.
Yeah, you'd hope Lampkin's playing 26 to maybe 30 even a game to really keep Syracuse sturdy down low. He plays a lot out of the post-up. And the thing about the post-up is you need to have shooting on the outside. Because if you don't, you're going to get yourself in double teams and just gunk in the paint. So you've got Elijah Moore, freshman. We know he can shoot it. But you've also got Lucas Taylor, who Syracuse brings in from Georgia State. And he was a former Wake Forest Demon Deacon. And his job is going to be to sit on the wing and shoot it. Period.
Yeah, and they don't have a lot of those guys right now. So that sort of role, that niche role, is up for the taking. And you hope that Taylor is a guy who can do it. He led Georgia State in scoring last year at about 14.5 points per game. So he can pour it in at a pretty consistent clip, shot about 35% from beyond the arc. So he's going to fill that role, obviously alongside Chris Bell as well. You hope that with this guy, Taylor, you get it at a little more of a consistent clip, because we all know the roller coaster shooting displays that Chris Bell can piece together. But you'd figure another year under his belt, maybe some more consistency. You add Taylor to the fold, a little less pressure as far as Bell is concerned, and then the two of those guys can kind of be your knockdown 3 and D, if you will, type players.
Last two guys with 3 minutes on the clock. We got Jaquan Carlos, guard from Hofstra. He will run an offense. I'm not sure if he can score, but he can run an offense. He has Hofstra's career high in assists, single game career high with 19, and he will pass. He can do that really well. Other guy is Jair Davis from Delaware, who will be your junkyard dog. 6'8", double-double machine with the Blue Hens, and he's probably looking at a Malik Brown type of role.
And these are two guys who know what it takes to win, albeit at the CAA level. Delaware and Hofstra, who have obviously held their own. CAA all-second teamer last season for Jair Davis, third teamer the year before that for a Delaware squad that won the CAA in 2022. So again, Ian, the larger point is these are all good pieces, but none of them really grab your attention. So you have to hope that it all kind of gels and it all kind of meshes together to a point where everybody can step into a specific role and execute that role.
Lampkin grabbed everyone's attention over the offseason, but that was because his commitment to Syracuse was rumored to be in question at one point in time, and then he kind of came out, squashed the rumors, said, I'm staying, don't worry about that. And it seems like he's really enjoying himself. I've seen him man in the barbecue grill at a Boys and Girls Club event over the summer. So
awesome.
He's fully bought in, and it seems like this group will at least bring some stability. You hope. You never know with transfer portal classes that are this big. But hopefully there is some stability, as well as the new additions on the coaching staff and now a GM as well. All right, that's 30 minutes. And that is probably the closest we're going to get to a full synopsis of the Syracuse basketball offseason. All right, two quick things before we get out of here. First, the 2024-25 schedule is out. First game is a month from the 26th, October. Clarion in an exhibition game at the Dome. We got one more against Slippery Rock before Lemoyne comes to town. Just a little 10-minute drive across the 315, November 4th. They probably don't have a time on that yet, but yeah, no time announced, but would assume that's a 7 o'clock tip in the Dome. And you got Colgate, Youngstown State, sleeper, before the Legends Classic, one of two trips to the Barclays Center that Syracuse makes. And you go to Thompson Bowling Arena in Knoxville for your second matchup in 2 straight years with Tennessee, who dogged the Orange last year down in Maui. So, Johnny, as we look through the off-season and now the non-conference schedule, what games jump out to you before we talk about ACC play? Besides Tennessee, what?
Yeah, I mean, Colgate's always been fun. Colgate is always an interesting one. with what they've got going on in Hamilton. So that's a game you got to go out there. You got to take care of business and make sure that you don't get a repeat from a couple of years ago. The Brooklyn trips are always fun too. Texas will be an interesting game. That'll be game 1. And then obviously game 2 of that Legends Classic TBD based on how the results shuffle out the other 2 teams involved, St. Joseph's and Texas Tech. So that's interesting. Can you hold your own against Tennessee? Right? Is that a squad that you can say, okay, maybe we're not quite on your level, but we can run with you and we can hang with you. And then Georgetown. I mean, Georgetown's always a fun one. Mid-December, right, when everybody's getting ready for, the holiday vibes. Can you slam the door against one of your rivals? And then Maryland too. This is a really intriguing non-conference schedule. You see a little bit of everything. You see some teams that you should beat. You see some teams that you're on a pretty similar level to. And then you see some teams where you're probably going to go in as underdogs, a la Tennessee. But that's what it's for, right? Particularly for a group that hasn't really played a lot, very much together. And they're going to need that time to kind of mesh and gel. It shapes up to be a really, really intriguing November and December.
You've got an early conference game smashed in there against Notre Dame, December 7th, on the road in South Bend. And then the conference slate comes around, and 2 pretty interesting things jumped out at me. First of all, Syracuse does not make a single trip to North Carolina. They play all 4.
How is that possible?
North Carolina once, and they are all at the JMA Wireless Dome, including North Carolina and North Carolina State back-to-back, with 11 days broken up in between.
Yeah, February 15th versus the Heels, February 26th versus the Pack.
That's a strange one. You get Duke on a Wednesday as well. I mean, that doesn't really sit right with me.
Right.
The other thing, you go to Stanford and Cal back-to-back. That makes sense, Wednesday to Saturday. But you also go to SMU later on in the year. That's the penultimate game of the regular season. Syracuse is the only team in the ACC that has to make all 3 trips away from the actual Atlantic coast.
And get
What's up with that?
The Cal game on February 1st, some of these games are still TBA, but some of them they have released the tip time. Cal game on the 1st, a 10 p.m. tip.
What is that? Is that a weekday?
That is a Saturday night. Okay, so at least it's on a weekend, but still.
Not terrible, but the viewing audience on that is going to be just atrocious.
Yeah, it's a weird schedule, man. It really is. I did not realize that nugget about the Carolina teams. That must really have you pretty bummed.
Yeah, that's my only chance to see Syracuse.
Right.
Usually I get 3 shots a year, 0 this year, which is a big fat bummer.
Well, maybe that's a reason for you to have to make the trip up north at some point.
Yeah, maybe I will. That'll be fun. All right, last thing. Johnny, before the season wrapped up in 2024, I guess we kind of put a little wager down here that whoever's bracket was worse would sing One Shining Moment.
Yes, we did.
My bracket was worse. So here goes nothing. Are you gonna put music? Are you gonna put music under this, or am I doing an a cappella?
Well, you could. I'll pull it up here. You can sing along.
No, you could just put it down there in the post production if you want.
Yeah, that's true. We can make some magical edits happen after the fact.
All right, here we go. I'll give you the first stanza.
Sure.
The ball is tipped, and there you are. You're running for your life. You're a shooting star, and all the years, no one knows just so hard you worked. But now it shows. There's one shining moment. It's all on the line. One shining moment there, frozen in time. There you go. That's as much. That's about what you're gonna get.
That was spectacular.
But yeah, I hope I gave David Barrett a run for his money.
CBS should give you a call come February and see if they want to redo their recording.
Well, if they're gonna put it out, if they put One Shining Moment out at 12:45 every single, dude, I'm not staying up that late. The game already starts at 9, and again, was not much of a game last year.
Yep.
Like I just don't have the juice to stay. I'll watch it in the morning, man. All
Set
right.
that DVR.
Yeah, that's going to do it here. First episode of a new basketball season. Red is the new orange. We are rocking and rolling for year 2. Subscribe, follow wherever you get your podcasts, be that Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Megaphone, and give us a follow on Twitter, F68_Cuse, and the Field of 68. If you are a fan of the America East Conference, news just dropped as we were recording this, that the Field of 68 will be live at America East Media Day. So Rob Doster, Jeff Goodman, and the crew will be there with in-depth interviews with players, coaches alike, and a full preview of the America East. So, Binghamton fans, keep an eye out for that one and all your mid-major conference action, because the Field of 68 covers all teams throughout college basketball from top to bottom. Johnny Gadamowitz, Ian Unsworth signing off. We will catch you next Monday. We will answer some burning questions that we might have, that you might have, going into the next Syracuse basketball season. So, have a good weekend. Go Orange, folks. We're back.